So I was reading about this space, the security space, the SaaS security space. And this is a vast, complicated space. And like so many spaces in SaaS and in technology, it looks like it's going to explode in the next few years. But let's bring our guest in to talk about that. Hi, Sandrine. Thank you for being patient while I get the technical things worked out.
No worries. Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone.
Hey. Yeah. How are you today?
I'm feeling cool. I'm feeling very fine. I'm very glad to talk to you and all the other people. So this is very exciting.
Right. Just to be clear, so you're not only the CEO of Cosmian, you're also the co-founder, correct?
Yes, I co-founded the company, yes, with my business partner, Bruno, who's the CTO, the technical director, yeah.
Okay. And how long has the company been around?
Been around for 5 years now. Already 5 years. That's a lot.
Already 5 years. Being a startup CEO and co-founder is a little bit like dog years. I think we age faster.
Yeah, don't talk to me about that, please.
Okay, we'll avoid that subject. Fair enough. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit about Cosmian. So I was reading about your background, and it seemed like early on the company's founders did a lot of work with the CNR. It's like you have a really strong technical foundation, and that was a big part of what you did to start the company. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what happened is when with my co-founder, we got interested into data, and how to protect data. We had this, as entrepreneur, we could see there was huge avenues to improve how sensitive data can be used, and at the same time being super protected. And this is actually what started to get us excited about the project and get into the project. And we had another thing that we wanted to match with what eventually became Cosmian. We thought that to somehow solve this paradox of how to massively use sensitive data and at the same time make sure that protection, security, and confidentiality are really, 100%, done. We thought that a technical solution, a technology actually has to be put in place. Not that we believe in technology is going to save the world and this is the best things ever happen. It's not really that, but we thought that need to go to a next step and something which is really strong, something that we can't technically understand, and it has to be beyond, agreement that people could sign on paper, just to be a little bit caricatural, but that was the idea. And so we started to think, okay, what kind of technology could actually help solve this paradox? New technology or something, already existing. So let's look around. And this how we started to look around in a couple of technology. And we, for instance, look at the blockchain. And we thought that we could actually now with Cosmian have the blockchain, but it wasn't going to be the technology actually to solve the paradox of accessing and using and protecting sensitive data. And eventually, especially on the part of my co-founder, Bruno, who can read academic paper on mathematics and cryptography. I'm an engineer, in background, but I will stop after a few lines of the academic abstract in mathematics. But then, at some point he said, I just was reading this paper by this fantastic laboratory in cryptography, which is based in Paris. It's actually a laboratory from École Normale Supérieure, CNRS and INRIA, which is actually managed by Professor David Poincheval, who's a very famous, worldwide actually famous cryptographer and mathematician. And we were like, Eureka, this is it. We found it. We need to use cryptography to solve the paradox of how to protect data and use data. And this is how everything started. And as you mentioned, it was really at the same time I was administratively, started the company. We contacted Professor David Poincheval. I remember it was in the middle of July, the summer month in Paris. And yeah, we were reading your paper. We have a few questions because we didn't really understand everything. And we have this idea about company or product services. Can we talk? And the answer is yes, sure, come over. And this is how things started. So yes, from the very beginning for us to have this fundamental, very strong, DNA in tech and in academic, that was very important to us. This is also something that get us excited and that we love to do, in our daily job. So that was a way to match actually the need for the company, the market, but also a personal, interest and enthusiasm about academic research.
Okay, it's really interesting. I think that's one of the things that's really unique about the French tech sector is tends to be a really strong connection, increasingly so with deep technology. I think before there was a little bit of a break, like where people like to mix too much technology in business and deep research in business, but increasingly that's not the case.
Yeah, so I think that's the increase that you notice is, I think there was like evolution on both sides. I think that maybe 10 years ago or 20, 15 years ago, it wasn't that obvious. I think that entrepreneurs and, academics, researchers, top level academic research were maybe living in different worlds, seeing each other, not as enemy, but, okay, if you're an entrepreneur, you're not in science, not in research, and vice versa. And I think that things have improved a lot in that aspect, and that, you have bridges and you have more connection and you have ability to, as I was explaining, contact and work with incredible, scientists, king in their fields. And with also the tech aspect, so especially in our field, with cryptography, which is basically mathematics. This is a field which is evolving, I would say, academically speaking, very fast.
Yeah.
There are things you can do now with cryptography that you couldn't do 5 years ago when we started the company. So the technology also, have this potential to move from the lab to the market. I will not say it's easy because our job is not easy, but it's marketable pretty much in a time frame which is compatible with a business. Maybe there are some other, academic field, in physics or maybe in biology or others that the time to market will be longer, very long. But in our case, this is something which is also super interesting, is the fact that, the novelty, the innovation that those technology can bring the pace is very strong, very fast, and the marketability of what we can do with that is also very high. So that's a good combination to be in that field right now.
Yeah, and I think there's adoption of the cloud. There's the cloud's getting more complex. We have multi-clouds. We have hybrid clouds. Now there's quantum computing, which is going to change cryptography. I don't know how you even secure things using cryptography with computing, and as soon as someone comes out with a way to do it,
I can explain you.
You can explain it to me.
We do already a post-quantum cryptography, so I can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I actually wrote that down as one of my questions, so maybe we'll get to that.
Okay.
Let's start with, we're B2B Rocks, we're SaaS Radio. So how do you help SaaSes?
So we help SaaS services, platform providers. We help them actually to increase the level of security and confidentiality. And it is very important because now the data those actually companies receive to perform their services, those data come from other companies. They could come from banks, for instance. We work a lot actually in financial services on that. Banks, could be hospitals. So the data providers actually are different from the data service provider, which are the SaaS platform. And now with this environment of multi-cloud that you mentioned, the level of security which is increasing, now for SaaS platform, it is important to provide evidences and include in their services the fact that security and confidentiality of the data that they are manipulating is super high. And this is even reaching to a point, and this is when it comes to cryptography. So cryptography being the science of encrypt data and decrypt data. It's now up to a point where with the development of cryptography and the requirements actually very demanding on the part of those data providers is to be able for SaaS provider to still, of course, provide their services to their clients, but in a way where they don't have any access to the data in clear text. So they can actually provide their service working and exploiting data encrypted, and they will never see the data from the bank's customers, for instance, or from the patient at the hospital and stuff like that. So this is really something. This is great. I think this is to be able to reach that level of security and confidentiality. Of course, everybody wants to do so. It wasn't, merely possible a couple of years ago, or if it was possible, it was maybe in a bench, in a laboratory, in theory, but the performance was actually not good. But this is why I was mentioning that in the past years, there was incredible progress in cryptography, and you can do stuff now that you couldn't do 5 years ago. So now actually being able to help SaaS providers to actually provide a higher level of security. This is actually something that is going to help them also to secure this, because that demand from the data provider is coming very strongly. And for SaaS provider, it's really a way to win business and to develop greater business with your current clients if you can bring that level of security and confidentiality. And this is where we actually play a role. We actually provide bricks with cryptography to SaaS providers to help them to do their job in total confidentiality and security.
Okay, so you're the Legos on the security side, on the cryptography side.
Yeah.
That's what I read about your company, and that's what I found a little bit hard to understand, is it sounds like you allow people to use data, to analyze data, but there's a layer there that provides still privacy and security. So it's hard for someone who doesn't have the expertise to really fathom how that works. But that's absolutely fascinating. But there's so much data, and the question now becomes is how do we protect that? So who is your ideal client profile? Who uses this? Are these people in really sensitive industries, or is this across the broad SaaS industry? Or
so it's actually across the board. So what is also super exciting and interesting in the field where we operate, apart from the excitement with the cryptography and the academic part, is also the fact that it starts, when we started the company, it was in the middle of the big push for GDPR and how to protect sensitive data. And when people think sensitive data, they think personal data, obviously, right. And of course. So they think medical data, they think personal data, email, age, gender, stuff like that. There's also a lot of sensitive data, personal data in financial services. And no wonder that actually we started, working with clients in banks mostly and in the health sector, because these are the two sectors, the two industrial vertical where you have those personal, very sensitive data that you need to use and manipulate all the time. This is at the essence of the job of the bank and the job of the pharmaceutical laboratory or the hospital. So they still want to be able to do their job, and at the same time to actually increase. They have to, yeah. And they have to increase that level of security. So this is how we started, definitely, with this type of industry, these two. But it's really evolving now, and this is why it's so interesting, to other sectors where data may not be personal in the sense of the GDPR, personal data, but still very sensitive and confidential, especially in the industrial world, in a broad sense of it. Production data, energy data. When you are in environments such as supply chain, actually, you have different, players, third party in the supply chain. You have manufacturers. You may have, supplier of material suppliers. You may have regulator. You may have services. Different stuff. Different players actually, and we now work for company which are industry company that need to protect and use industry data, which are not GDPR personal data, but they are still very confidential and sensitive data, even if they're not personal. So this is why we really see, from our perspective as we develop the company, that it really started in the first 2 years with answering, those needs for the company and the sector with those very sensitive personal data. And then this is really, progressing into other industry where data are also very confidential and very sensitive, but not even if they are not personal. I can give you some example, whenever you want.
Yeah, please do. Please, why don't you give us a concrete example of it?
So, Yeah. So, for instance, in the I would say non-GDPR, personal sensitive data field. So, for instance, we work with a big company in the US. It's a company who manufactures, tools, machinery. So, machinery tools. It's a huge manufacturer, and they provide those tools to their clients. And those clients are going to use these tools to produce their own, product or elements. It's a huge company. And what they want to do as a company is they want to increase the service and optimize the production process for their clients. So to do so, they need to access the production data of their clients to do some. It's not rocket science, analysis. It could be, simple statistics, about optimization, default in production, stuff like that. Not rocket science, but very important. And this is to say that data is not always related to super, complicated AI stuff. You have also very basic problem with basic statistics that you can actually address. So they turn to their customers and say, hey, we would like to provide this service that would be good for you. You will optimize and blah, 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 your service to us, et cetera, et cetera. And the clients say, yeah, we are very interested in that, but there's no way you're going to access our production data. This is very sensitive because you will have access to our suppliers. You will have access on how we produce actually the product using your tools, but this is also our secret sauce. So this is complicated. No way it's going to happen.
Right.
And we help them actually because we're going to help with our products and with cryptography to help anonymize the data on premise at our clients' customers, premises.
Yep.
And then our clients will be able to retrieve, anonymize, and encrypted data. And from those data, they will be able to perform actually the analytics and then provide a recommendation to their clients.
I see where you're going with this now. I think of a company like John Deere with all their tractors. And so they've got tons of information coming with their tractors, and then they have tons of information coming in about their clients and what they're producing.
I dream to work with them. If you have any contacts, please let me know. They're really fantastic. Exactly. That's exactly this type of, very industrial, down to earth, with John Deere stuff. Yeah. And this is actually definitely where we can help. Yeah.
That was a great pun, down to earth. Yeah, no, there was, I forgot the person, I remember reading his name, but he said, data is the new oil. And just like to take oil out of the ground, there's a cost, and then we have to transform it in order to produce something and create value with it. Sorry, I know that it's not very ecological correct to talk about oil, but it's the same thing with data. So these companies are producing data. There's value in that data. But the question is how do you secure it, and how do you, like you say, make it anonymous so that you're not giving away their secret sauce, and make it so that the data is exploitable? Is there an ecological aspect to this too? As you look to encrypt data and make things usable, are you looking also how to do this in a way that's most energy efficient, or is that still further down on the horizon?
Yes, we look at this, and this is actually, I would say, there's a positive collateral effect to that, because when we work on improving the performance of encryption, so performance will mean that, when you think about encrypting, data or encrypting, you basically adding noise to the data. So people know that when you add that noise, you will, somehow increase the size of the data. And then if you increase the size, it's becoming more energy consuming in terms of storing, in terms of processing, so on and so forth. So actually working on the performance of the encryption is going to reduce, the energy that you're going to consume to store the data and using it. So it's not only because the performance is good, and then our customers, usually they have the choice between, okay, I work in clear text, and this is going to be complicated in case of, data leakage or cyber attacks. So I know I should encrypt as much as possible, but I'm afraid that while I'm encrypting, actually, I'm going to lose the performance of my systems. And sometimes my systems, they need to be, super performant. Like, to think about a bank, they have trillions of data all the time. So it's good to encrypt. But then when you want to access your data, it takes 2 or 3 minutes. It's not marketable. It's not a marketable product. So when you work on the performance, yes, it's actually doing this benefit that actually to reduce also how you're going to consume the energy to your process. So it's definitely something which can happen.
So I've worked on the peripheries of data security in another industry before. And one of the things, now this was a few years ago, it was in a different industry, but people always say they want to be secure. When you read Gartner reports, everyone says security is a priority. But what always shocks me is how insecure everything is. Is this, and how reticent people are to spend money on this as well. Is this less the case for you, since people are really looking to exploit this data and they're motivated, they get more value out of the data?
Well, you definitely have a cost benefit analysis for clients, and now we are reaching a point where doing nothing is going to cost more than investing in doing something efficient. So, if I may say so, so this is why it's a good time to be doing this in this business, because now really it's not only it's a question of money, but this is really the fact that when you balance the risk, the cost, and the benefits, now you need to keep the same benefits, you need to invest, and you need to reduce the risk. Because everything actually, as you mentioned, now everything goes into the cloud. It wasn't the case 5 or 10 years ago, so the risks were different, and they were maybe better monitored because everything was on-prem, because data, it was databases. Now we talk about big data in the cloud. So the landscape is very different. And the threats also are different and deeper. This is not to scare people, but this is to say that you have to adapt. And the tools that were totally fine 10 years ago or even 8 years ago now are starting to show their limits. And as everything like this progress, there's also the regulation and the constraint. And in those sectors, specifically in finance and in health, of course, data is very sensitive. And now as the industry learn more about the best practices and how to protect efficiently data with new tools, and for instance, advanced cryptography as we do, it's becoming difficult actually not to adopt those best practices. We see, for instance, in financial services, and this is why I was mentioning SaaS provider in fintech. Now, those banks, they really ask fintech as SaaS provider to provide this level of security, because if any data leak, happen, even if your customer, like the end user, has signed, user condition that prevent and say that we're not responsible if any data leakage happen, this is going to be very difficult to argue that, and to protect yourself behind the contract, especially if it is demonstrated that there are best practice and way to improve the security that were not actually in place. So there's really the level of of demands, and the level is augmenting as the means and the tools to meet those requirements are now existing. So this is actually it's a very good news. So yes. Definitely,
that is good news. That is good news. The sector I worked in was IoT, and I was always shocked at how little was being done to protect the data on a device and protect the device itself. And it's like people are putting these devices in their house, and you're like, it's absolutely terrifying. Actually, one of the things also about security, I think it's misunderstood, is, and you write a little bit about this on your website, is zero trust. And so I think people think of zero trust as some sort of panacea for security. It's like, okay, we've done that, we've checked that box. And I think it's really misleading, because it's only like a tiny little piece of the security. And what do people get wrong about zero trust?
So I think zero trust, it's not a checkbox, to check. No. It's really an environment which is depending on many other elements. The whole point about zero trust is like, especially with that massive move to cloud. So basically, where you're in the cloud, your data, your application, from a company perspective, you're on somebody else's computer. You're not on your own computer. So there are things that you don't control. And the name of the game is to be able to regain control on your data, your application, your infrastructure, even if it's running, not on-prem anymore. And that concept of zero trust, it's a concept, but it's not a mindset, but this is a framework, and this is a way, it's like a compass, it's a compass to make sure that you are in control. And if you are in control, it means that you don't trust third parties and you don't trust, service providers. You don't trust. You don't have to trust. So it's not ethical. It's not a moral position, that you should, mistrust everybody. But from a security perspective, you should know exactly what's happening, to your data, who is accessing that. You should be able to have control on the access, on those data, application and user, everything, and having this control while it's not on-prem anymore. So that zero trust, it's really to be able to develop your business and your infra and all your services in zero trust environment, meaning that you know exactly, what's going on, and you're not in a relationship, with provider or service or an infra where the third parties tell you, trust me, I know about security and this is secure with me, trust me.
Yeah.
So the thing to say, it's not a question of trust. I need to know, I need to access, I need to see, I need to know exactly how the thing is working. And I don't want to trust you, to not consider, how I can regain control of my data. So this is zero trust. There's no one product that's doing zero trust, like that for everything. But this is really to have this, I would say, mindset and this obsession that you shouldn't trust anyone, at least in the field of cybersecurity, of course. And now there's actually tools for that. Not only cryptography, but open source is actually something very important in zero trust in cybersecurity. And at Cosmian, all our products and our encryption scheme are open source.
Open source, okay.
Open source, to be able for people to check, what's running and how it works. It is very important. This is something which is definitely also recommended by the National Cybersecurity Agency, like the ANSSI in France, is code, software. It should be open source. If not, how can you be sure that there's not a backdoor or something weird that's going to run? You need to have access to the code.
What about the problem? I know in other industries there's issues with open source where sometimes open source will actually be infected with. Great. Have you ever? I've seen that be an issue. For example, in IoT, where people use algorithms and other things in IoT, where the open source, because the code isn't controlled and hasn't been properly audited. So
well, the whole point of open source is to be auditable. So I don't know exactly about those examples that you mentioned, but the whole point of it is that other people can exactly audit your code and actually identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses. And it's almost the case in that cryptographic space, because if you encrypt, you hide, obviously. so you can't just say, okay, trust me, I'm hiding the stuff in the proper way. There's always people, and especially in the cryptographic community, which is a very dense community, people need to check, and this is something that we rely on. There's things that actually can that we might miss. So that's why it's important actually to have other people to review and to pinpoint and to point to issues that could be in your code or in the schemes. So I'm not familiar with the issues that you mentioned, but where they're really open source and how this was monitored. So I don't know exactly, but when you commit, you have the code. You see, how people commit. You see the comments. Yeah. And first of all, as a software publisher, we are open source. It doesn't mean that it's open bar, and it doesn't mean, because large corporations they want to have support. They want to have maintenance. They want to make sure that, they work with a company which is solid and provide, the level of services that they want to, then they are absolutely right to demand. So sometimes, the universes got mixed, between open source, to be amateur or not. So open source means business. So that would be my key message.
Well, I mean, not all projects are the same. Open source projects are the same. And so, but I mean, I think the fact that when you have more people looking at code and auditing code and more people looking at cryptographic algorithms and auditing those algorithms, that's a good idea.
But once again, we talk about security. You can have open source project, and we have seen some of this project in the health field, for instance. And actually, we were asked to complement open source project to actually add the layer of security. So I think that maybe in the IoT stuff that you mentioned, there will be maybe an issue with the security of the software, of the code, and not maybe the product of the code itself, of the IoT service, but something related to security.
My bad. I took you down a rabbit.
No, I don't know.
It's my bad. Yeah, I think, when I was listening to you talk about that, which is in Zero Trust, I was just thinking about, it just means understanding your attack plane, understanding all the different vulnerabilities, map those out, and make sure that when you're sharing data is going back and forth between you and your partner, all the different points of vulnerability, and that all those are understood, and that it's being properly treated at each level.
Yeah, but usually the people we talk to, they know, but they know that, but they need to. Sometimes they don't know that things that are possible now were not possible 5 years ago. So this is also a job to make it known. But and usually, as you say, the thing is don't trust anyone with your own security. That's what I mean. It's like this is your job, and you need to know exactly what's going on. You need to access anything that you need to make sure that your security is safe. So in that sense, this is what is called Zero Trust.
So your organizations you're working with, do they typically have a CISO? Do they typically have a chief information security officer?
Yes, that's typically the people we talk to. That's cybersecurity team, the tech team, CTO, CISO, could be the people working, with data. And the things, you have this couple, I would say, between the data people and the cybersecurity people, and the way the dynamic works.
Sounds like Protestants and Catholics. Okay.
No, more or less. But the thing is, data people, they have tons of creative ideas, to use data and to develop the business and technical stuff. That's fantastic. And usually, they, before doing anything, because they know the boundaries, obviously, they will turn to the cybersecurity and CEO people and say, hey, we have this great idea, we'd like to do that. Blah, blah. And usually the cybersecurity team will say no. So it's because it's risky. Doing stuff with sensitive data in clear text, it's not that it's not possible, legally. It's just that it's risky. So once again, we come back to this balance between risk and benefits. And then, we have this cybersecurity team and CISO people that, they are the guy who say no, it's no, the no guy.
The no guys.
The no guys. So we want to have the no guys to become the yes guys. And so usually, we talk to the people in the data team, in the business actually team dealing with data for different service or product. And we also talk to the CISO team, because we could be introduced by the data people saying, hey, you remember what we wanted to do? And you say you can't do that because it's too risky, because data is not encrypted, blah, blah, blah. Ta-da! We may have a solution for you. And then we go through, the audit, and the demands of the cybersecurity team for them to check, how things are working and everything. So it's a little bit, these dynamics usually a lot in. So it could be like data people and also architecture, team, especially when there is this huge move to cloud for data application, and they have those questions. They say, okay, so everything is going to be running and be stored and used, not on-prem anymore. how can I reconcile actually the confidentiality and the security of my client's data while I'm running everything in the cloud? So we also talk directly to architecture people and obviously cybersecurity team too. Yeah.
I think, we kind of started with the mono cloud where everyone was on a single monolithic cloud provider. Now we're seeing more hybrid environments where people may have some in-house on-premise systems and cloud. And now we're in a multi-cloud hybrid environment. And now once you start dealing with partners as well, then you have to maybe move data off from your public cloud to their public cloud. It sounds like your space is going to only get exponentially more challenging.
Well, it's not really challenging. It's not the word. It's a lot of opportunity, definitely, because
that's very American centered.
No, but it's actually because the way it works with us, with Cosmian. So I will be very quick on that. Actually, encryption system that our clients use are totally agnostic, regarding the cloud, because everything is encrypted before, being sent to the cloud. So, the hybrid stuff or the multi-cloud, I mean, for us, this is not an issue because it works, whatever is the cloud or the mix between, public or private. And actually, you will be even more surprised if I say that we could see a little comeback of the on-prem, actually. At some point.
I've been reading about this where a lot of organizations, especially bigger organizations, they're looking at this and they're doing cost benefit analysis and they're like, it actually makes sense to have some things on premise in a case. And it depends on the factors, but I've actually seen shops on completely back to on premise.
Well, actually, I think that this move to cloud is not 100% move to cloud. The bank we work with, they are testing and they are using, not really private cloud, public cloud, but some kind of a private cloud. So yeah, they are pushing stuff to the cloud, but they try also to maintain as much control as possible. That's why this is, as you call, private or hybrid. And actually, the example I was giving you about the US, machinery manufacturer, and the fact that we were anonymizing data from actually the clients, and we have exactly the same case with hospitals and pharmaceutical laboratories. So where are the data that you want to protect? The anonymization and the encryption process will be done on-prem because those clients, they don't want to send the data, even encrypted, out of their premises. So maybe then the calculation later can happen in the cloud, but data actually will be totally, protected. So we see actually in this case, we have actually started to propose actually it's a confidential computing product using cryptography amongst that. We started to offer it as a SaaS platform actually for our clients to be able to send data and algorithm, everything protected, encrypted, and do confidential calculation using the cloud, actually the SaaS, making sure that with cryptography the cloud can't learn anything. That's the whole point. You want zero trust with the cloud either, obviously. And it was very interesting to see that when we started to propose and to push this offering and the business cases, the clients we work with now, they say, okay, we want this, but could you do it on-prem?
Yeah.
So I think there would be, it's not, on-prem is not totally dead yet.
Yeah.
So there are actually some cases it will stay very vivid, I think.
And I know, having worked in security environments like that, like in some cases they want on-premises, but I mean, they have secure access to the site and it's really serious. What about, you mentioned the banking and the financial sector. I know a lot of older banking institutions have some really old legacy systems. I don't know about in France, but in the US, like there's like S390s and really old IBM systems where you have to program with COBOL. And so is that an issue for you, or I know that's getting really technical, but
No. Yes, that's definitely an issue. I mean, I think that across the board, this is the same picture, everywhere. I think banks, what they have been doing. So what's interesting with banks is they always look for a new technology, not for the sake of it, but because they have this regulation, because they manipulate sensitive data, because you have cross-border stuff, so on and so forth. So they always look for, new security stuff. So this is a space where they're quite savvy, about what's going on. It's not the case of all the sectors. We're not dropping names.
They have money.
And they have money, yeah. But, pharmaceutical laboratories too, and so on and so forth. So, and yes, and usually there is some legacy stuff, but they have managed somehow in the past year to make it evolving and make sure that I would say the most critical, applications or infra actually are more recent. I'm not saying this is totally state of the art, and it could depend, on the banks, if it's a top tier bank or not a top tier bank, maybe they have less money and not the same type of clients and needs. But the top banks in France, they have this legacy, but they also, definitely already have implemented, new stuff, new infra. So and of course for the level of cryptography that we propose, it can't work with a system in COBOL. So actually, once we were interrogated by a bank and by a sector in that bank, and they say business unit in that bank, and they say, so can this work, on COBOL or whatever? And we say, no. And you say, will you try? And we say, we won't even try. It won't work. It's not possible to do that. So maybe for some stuff, maybe, and I think that the most critical data might not run on those infra anyway. So they maybe have stuff, and they might be using, old tools. But actually, definitely, but the most critical stuff is definitely, used already on very performing newer stuff. Yeah.
Good structure.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned quantum computing. So as I understand, quantum computing is going to destroy a lot of current cryptography approaches.
Yeah.
How is this going to work if most people are on like old school computing? I don't know what the term is, or regular computing, and then some people have access to quantum computers. I understand we're going to rent these. Yeah. How are we going to be able to protect our data?
Yeah. So the issue with quantum computing, apart the everything that is opening with the possibility of quantum computation, but there are risks, and there is actually that quantum computer will be more powerful to actually break the encryption system that we are using currently. So it's already known, and there are already actually encryption schemes that are not used anymore because anyway it's totally outdated. And the point now is to say that so quantum computing is not happening now, but it's happening in the near future. In the sense that it's possible now actually to protect and to encrypt the most sensitive data with actually post-quantum encryption, meaning that with those schemes, quantum computers won't be able to break the code. Okay, so that's why it's important because you have data, for instance, medical data, you encrypt now, and you don't want in 10 years, 20 years, or even 5 years, 7 years, that those data could be actually decrypted. On top of it, if you push those data in the cloud, you don't sometimes, because for the lack of zero trust, you don't know exactly, this data can be replicated. You can have copy of the data that will go into different, places. You have no idea. So even if this happens, if you use the robust post-quantum encryption scheme, even if your data is somewhere, it won't be decrypted. So right now, to be precise, it's possible to protect and to use post-quantum cryptography. Actually, in the US, they have started to push and to be very pushy, especially for the administration and also for the top corporation, most critical company in the US, and in particular the banks. They start to push and to say you have to use now cryptography that is post-quantum resistant. It doesn't have to be applied on all type of data, but on the most sensitive now it's possible to do. One caveat, what we call now post-quantum cryptography is actually a mix, and this is what we do at Cosmian. We are seriously, and I'm proud to say so, one of the very few companies worldwide to propose post-quantum encryption. And this encryption, following the guidelines of the NIST of the Cybersecurity Agency, it's a mix of classic encryption and already some post-quantum actually cryptography, because quantum computers, it's still something new. So they are going to evolve. So they are also going to become stronger, in terms of, breaking the code. So right now, the best way to protect is to do this hybridization of classic and post-quantum cryptography. And as the cryptography is evolving and also getting even stronger, we will actually, move from a mix of classical and post-quantum to something that will be 100% post-quantum, in 5-7 years. But right now, the hybridization is already very strong, and we follow the guidelines of the other cyber security agencies. So yes, the message is now, if you want to encrypt post-quantum everything, fine, but maybe you don't have to. But actually, for the most sensitive data, this is already possible, yeah. And to mention that with post-quantum, people always think about performance once again, and now the performance also is very good. Even with post-quantum encryption, it's super fast.
That's really interesting. That's kind of my question is like, the security side, are we condemned to be reactive, or can we be proactive? Can we address these things before our risk planes get too exposed, or are we condemned to always be reacting to like the latest technology?
Well,
it sounds like it really depends on the urgency of the industry and how they view it.
Well, the urgency is, there might be some industry, or where you don't have a lot of sensitive data, maybe, but the key message is that now it's possible to address those risks. So you can say this is being reactive because you need to adapt and use new tool, more performing with more performance. But actually, this is to be proactive. If in terms of cryptography, when you see all those attacks, especially, what happened in many hospitals, not only in France, but, in the world and across Europe. If your data, are stolen, encrypted, and you, as the organization is the one who encrypted the data, so you are the only one to be able to decrypt. If those data are stolen, well, it's a pity because it means that someone broke into your system and stole data, but they won't be able to decrypt the data. So that's still better than, so they can't do anything with that. There will be no blackmailing, this is what happened. They can't sell, encrypted data on the dark web because no one is going to buy data that they can't decrypt. So that level already of using, the new tools in encryption that actually now fit to, the cloud environment, the big data, and this new environment for cybersecurity. It's not to be reactive, it's really to be proactive. Once again, to protect yourself, your data, and your assets and your company from potential attacks. And those attacks, the level of those attacks are definitely increased, in sophistication. So it's not to be reactive, but to be proactive, to also, also raise your the playing field, on the side of the corporation. So I don't see this, as being reactive, but as being proactive. But usually, yes, if you have an issue with a data leakage, yeah, you become more reactive because you know that you have to do it. So actually, it's sad to hear all of those attacks, but if it can actually help other companies to say, yeah, I don't want this to happen to me, so I need to invest. I need to do, because eventually, if it happens, the cost of that, it's actually going to be bigger. Definitely, it's bigger.
You mentioned cost. You said that data breaches are costly. Is that because of the legislative environment? Is that because governments are putting heavier fines on this stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So the legislation, and so that could depend, on different countries. And we see, for instance, that in the US, there's regulation, of course, for banks, for medical data, so on and so forth. But there's also an environment where and it was pushed by a little bit by the government, not by a law, but it was more like a framework to say that if it's proven that a company had a data leakage, bad news, of course. But if it even proven that that company didn't put in place the common best practice in cybersecurity, and amongst them encryption, but not only encryption. So this is going to cost them even more, because eventually the data of the user, the patient at the hospital or the bank user that have seen their data stolen, if they learn that actually it's because the company didn't put in place, the necessary tools that are almost like commonplace now. Yes, class action system, it costs a lot of money. So this is definitely something that, this is in that, that's that balance actually, which is becoming more and more actually complicated. And not only for the money aspect, which is obviously always important, but also reputation, if a company, the reputational risk, it costs money, definitely. So you don't want to see your name as a company on, top pages of the newspaper saying that you were totally, not up to the task to protect your customers' data. So you will say, okay, I don't care, they all sign a contract to be my clients. No, you're going to lose clients and you won't get new ones.
Yeah, I think in the US, we have 1/4 of the world's lawyers. And so if you do something wrong, you're probably going to get sued. And we also, for example, I get my credit note in the United States where they tell me my credit score. And they also tell me if I can join any class actions against other organizations who have misused my data. And so periodically you just get like a little notice where it's like, hey, you might be eligible for $500 or X number of dollars because this company misused data, and you didn't even know they had access to data or anything like that. But it does catch up to these organizations. And the guidelines you're talking about, are those written by the National Institute of Security Standard or like NIST?
NIST, it's not really standard for cybersecurity. It's actually the guidelines from the cybersecurity agency, which is not the NIST. This is more standardization, actually, Institute for Standards in Technology. And it's more related to the post-quantum stuff, for instance. But actually, you have like ANSI in France, you have ENISA in Europe. So definitely they have those guidelines. The whole question is, how do you really enforce those guidelines? So I think that in the US, you have the natural enforcement of this pool of lawyers that you mentioned in the market.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is exactly the same. So at some time I feel that, there's a feeling, that could be okay. So far so good, I don't think in the US they really think like that. They're like, okay, so far so good. This is a bit cautious, but maybe now, actually in Europe, there could be a way to enforce, but to really, raise the level and make sure that that level of security is definitely increasing. So you see, yes, all those attacks, and data leakage on hospital, on analysis laboratories. It's and there is simple stuff that have to be done. Doesn't have to be super sophisticated, but people don't want to see this hospital that was attacked a couple of months ago. But people having cancer and those data. So this is the data that you want to be. You don't want this data to be accessible. It brings so much more difficulties. You don't want, if you had a cancer when you were 20 or 25, or just it's going to obliterate the rest of your life when you want to have credit or you want to do stuff like that. So this is really this is really hurting people's life. So
there's a human element to it. You're right.
Which is very strong. Which is very strong.
I think I have children who are 15. I tell them, it's like, once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. But you don't understand that at 15. Hard. But even as adults, a lot of adults, complicated stuff. Speaking of complicated, what you guys just do is pretty technical. So is that a challenge from a marketing standpoint, marketing your solutions, or is your market so focused on what you do that they tend to get it, and it's
a challenge. It's a challenge within actually our space and the space of our customers and key the key people we talk to, in the sense that we talk to cybersecurity people, data people, technical people, architects. We don't talk to the general audience.
Right.
So that would be even tougher. But still, so we still talk to technical people who actually they know actually they have the background. Yes, technical backgrounds. In cybersecurity, they have some background in cryptography, so they know, the words, they know the concept, so they may not actually know the recent state-of-the-art progresses or advances. This is what we have to actually to communicate. But still, I mean, for a startup like Cosmian, the evolution in the way we position what we do and we explain what we do is actually at the beginning we were really, focusing and pushing, the wonderful world of cryptography. We say it's mathematics, so look what you can do with cryptography. You can protect data and use data. Fantastic. And as we evolve and we grow, it's like the cryptography, it's not the entry point. It's really to identify and to speak our clients, language, and to actually really talk about the pain points of our clients. And the challenge for us is actually, and this is why, coding something, it's one thing, but then a code that is really a product that answer a pain point, different. It's really complicated. It's really different. And then the challenge is really for us to try to hide the cryptography. Again, cryptography is hiding stuff. It's not that we can't explain, but this is not, people don't buy, cryptography. That's for the sake of it. They will choose Cosmian because we solve a big issue for them. We solve a big problems. And if this problem is solved by cryptography, great, great for us. So sometimes people say, "Oh, how do you do something innovative and you sell innovation?" I say, "I don't sell innovation. No, nobody wants to buy innovation because it's risky. We are here to solve issues that were not solved before, and it's innovative because we solve them in a way that wasn't, investigated before. And this is why it's innovative." And in our field, this is with cryptography. So the challenge for us is really actually to be at the right level and to concentrate and to really identify and package and answer the pain point of our clients, and to understand why they can't do what they would like to do and how we can help them to do so. And if it's with cryptography, super, and we explain that. But usually they come to us because they understood now that we have ways to solve things that they couldn't solve before. And this is with cryptography. It's also a secondary aspect of it, you see.
What you do is security. How you do it is with cryptography, but what it really comes down is why do it, which is protect your data. You want to ensure that your customers' data is protected, that you're being ethical and practicing good business practices. So that makes absolute sense. But I see that a lot of companies with a very technical focus, it's a real challenge to learn to talk and to communicate with clients. And what's interesting is what you just said is we talk less about ourselves than we did at the beginning, and we do a lot more listening to what our customers are trying to do. It's a natural evolution.
And the more interesting part of it is, sometimes I see, the decks we had at the beginning of the company, I was like, wow, we are very far from that, but we are doing with the materials we had at the time. So so that's absolutely normal. But this is really, as you say, is really to focus on the client's needs and to package that and to understand that, and not to talk about us actually, but really to understand what they want to do and how we can help. And with cryptography, actually, for data protection, cryptography is really the best tool, the best weapon against attacks. If your data is encrypted and you have control on encrypt and decrypt, and nothing can happen.
Listen, you've been very generous with your time. I do have just a couple more questions. So, but I'm going to change a little bit away from your company. Maybe just ask you about your role as a founder and a co. So, for you, what has been the biggest challenge? Your last role, I read you were a general manager of an organization. Now you're a co-founder and a CEO. What's been the biggest challenge, co-founder and a CEO?
Well, comparing to my previous role as a general manager, I was not the co-founder of the company, so it's actually and this is something that I wanted. I wanted to develop my own project, So it's there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of troubles, but it's a different trouble than when I was actually actually an employee of a company. So I have other. I prefer to have the issue as as a co-founder than when I was an employee. Which is really, which the name of the game is really to be able to last and to stay focused on what you try to achieve from the beginning. What was this, market intuition, back with science, back with the people that you work with and everything. So there are so many occasions to be not only distracted, but to take other paths. Because when you start something new, and especially also with that type of technology, there's a lot of things that you can do. So it's also so the role is also to say no at some point. Or you can say no, then you can come back and say yes.
But Steve Jobs said that. He said, "I'm as proud as the things we didn't do as the things we did." So you can't do everything. You can't be everything to everybody. So sometimes you have to do the best service to yourself and your organization by saying no.
Yeah, you have to say no. And sometimes, as a startup, it's more like a spiral stuff. So the most important is to go up. But sometimes, in a spiral, when you turn at some point, you maybe come back a little bit on your previous track, but still you're going up. So sometimes you have to recognize that what you thought 6 months ago or 3 months ago was not something to do. But then you back up a little bit and you say, maybe, what the clients say, the way you understand what we do, that's maybe something that we need to investigate. So you have to find a way to say no, as you say, because you could go in so many directions. You can dilute yourself and eventually the business has to grow. And at the same time, because things are still new, you need to make sure that you take roads that are not definitive at some point. You have to make choices, and when you make those choices, definitively you know that you won't come back, but still you need to preserve, a way to progress where, if you have to come back a little bit and adapt something, it's not like you put everything, through the windows and you have to start from scratch. So this is really, how to find that balance between progressing, not cutting, fundamental options, but sometimes you don't know when you take the decision those options are fundamental. Maybe you will discover, 2 weeks later or 3 months later. That's the beauty of the job. But still, you have to balance these two. Yeah, you have to balance these two. Yeah.
Every founder, CEO I've ever met has always described being part of a growing company as being something like on a roller coaster. They say there's a lot of
definitely
ups and downs.
And sometimes you think this is going to work and it's a total failure. And sometimes you think, okay, this is not, this is garbage. I don't want to even look at that. And then boom, the light comes from the garbage. So it's a roller coaster, but as long as you have ups after the downs, that's good.
And surround yourself with good people. Listen, again, thank you so much for your time. Okay, last 2 questions. What's your favorite rock song?
Well, my favorite rock song is a French band from the Rita Mitsuko called C'est comme ça. When I like energy, I put that, super loud and everything is fine.
Okay. Great. I don't know that one. I'll have to go look that up after this. I'm not allowed to play music on the show. And okay, last question. You're a sponsor of B2B Rocks. Are you going to be at B2B Rocks next week?
Me and the team, we're going to be there. It's a very important, moment actually for us to engage. So we're going to be there. Huge team.
Good. Well, that's great. I hope we get a chance to meet. I'll be on the main stage, and I'm good. And I wish you the best week. And
thank you. You too.
Maybe I'll get a chance to buy you a coffee.
I would love to. Thank you, Steven.
Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Really interesting people. We're in technology, but I always say it's Listen, no show next week. We do a live show from Bucks with since stage. Thank you so much for coming, and look forward to seeing you there. And if you're interested in security and encryption and how to protect your data, how to learn to exploit your data better, I recommend that you come and talk with Cosmian. Go in there. Thank you very much, and great day.